this is Stephanie Gordon at Gordon Property Management, and I'm here to give my thoughts and my advice on what you should do if you have a tenant who is not paying rent due to a COVID-19 emergency. And let me start off by saying today is Monday morning, April 27th, and that's important because whatever I say this morning could easily change this afternoon and certainly will change. There's a lot that we don't know right now. And I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just giving my advice. I've been managing residential real estate in San Francisco for over 30 years. And so I feel like I have some handle on what we can expect down the line if you have a tenant who's not paying rent. And basically my advice is going to be, do your best to work it out with your tenants. We really don't know when the courts are going to be open back up for property owners to file an unlawful detainer. What we know today is that Governor Gavin Newsom has said that 90 days after he lifts the California shelter-in-place emergency order, then courts will start accepting and hearing unlawful detainer actions. So we don't know when Governor Newsom is going to lift the shelter-in-place order for California. It certainly isn't going to be May 1st, because May 1st is just a couple days away. It's kind of a moving target. 2 weeks ago, Governor Newsom said that as soon as California could do 25,000 COVID-19 tests a day, that was one of the criteria for opening back up. Last week, he said we needed to do 60,000 COVID-19 tests a day. And from everything I read in here is that we don't have the ability to test that many people in California. We don't have enough swabs. We don't have enough medical equipment. The whole world doesn't have enough of that. And Gavin Newsom is also saying that it's going to be a slow reopening. So we don't really know what date the 90-day waiting period is going to entail. So for the sake of argument, let's say that June 1st is that date, and that Governor Newsom says California's back open for business on June 1st, and then that starts the 90-day period. 90 days after June 1st brings us to September 1st. In a normal process, you file an unlawful detainer, and it takes about 2 months, optimistically, to get through the court system, which would take us to a court date in November. That's very optimistic in my personal opinion, because I think, with courts closed and with so many tenants unable to pay their rent, there is going to be a mad rush whenever the courts do open back up. So realistically, you'll be lucky to get a court date in early 2021. That is why I am recommending, that's why my advice is to try and see if you can't work out some kind of arrangement with your tenant, because your day in court is probably very, very far away. It really is kind of like the wild, wild west out here, and you really are on your own to work things out with your residents. If there's a sheriff in town, he's not here for you. He is not here to help you and your private property rights. He is here to help your residents stay and be able to shelter in place and stay in their homes. When you do eventually get judicial relief, I don't think it's going to look like the same kind of relief that you got pre-COVID-19. I think when you get your day in court, you're going to have to forgive some kind of rent. You're not going to be able to necessarily collect 100% of your rent. There is talk in San Francisco of not being able to evict a tenant for 2 months that's 2 months behind in their rent, that you're going to have to forgive 60 days. Now, is that legal? Can they do that? I don't know. Will it be challenged in court? Probably. But it looks like for now, hopefully, at least temporarily, you're going to have to give up 60 days rent right off the top. For San Francisco, non-payment of rent was one of the genuine causes that we could evict a tenant for in San Francisco. And it looks like that may be going away. in California, it's not as draconian as it is in San Francisco, but the legislature is talking about forcing all landlords in California to accept 75% of the rent that the tenants were paying for the next year. Again, can they do that? Is it legal? I don't know. It seems like we have given our political leaders all kinds of power under an emergency order, or they have taken all kinds of powers under the emergency orders. And how is this all going to shake out? I don't think it's going to shake out very well for landlords. So again, I keep coming back to, you're on your own out there. Try and see if you can work things out with your resident. So if you have a resident who isn't paying rent due to a COVID-19 emergency, it could easily be 8 to 10 months until you get that tenant out of your apartment. So keep that in mind when you're working with your tenant. Be prepared to be generous. Talk to your residents, find out what their circumstances are. What can they pay? When can they pay? Can they pay partial rent? What are their circumstances? Try and work something out with them. At Gordon Property Management, we were very successful with that in April. We communicated a lot with our residents. We gave them all kinds of information, not just about, how they could get a hold of us, how we were handling maintenance, but things that the city was putting out, different information, and they were very, very receptive to that. So it's going to take a little work, and you're going to have to work with your residents. I know in San Francisco that's sometimes a bitter pill, and there may be some residents that you just can't work things out with. But if you can, try and work things out with your residents. Try and get your residents to at least pay half of their rent. That's what we've been doing at Gordon Property Management. We're actually pretty lucky. We only have maybe a dozen or less residents who we've had to work with in this way. But what we've done is we've tried to get them to pay half, and then what we're doing is we are deferring any unpaid rent. We're not asking for payment plans. We're not asking for any documentation. We're just agreeing to defer the rent. Now, the San Francisco Apartment Association came out with a rent forbearance form that we were all supposed to have our residents sign. Well, the San Francisco Tenants Union came out and said to tenants, don't sign anything. So we're not able to get our tenants to sign that. That's history. We're not trying to do that. In theory, Mayor Breed's order was that residents had to provide the landlord proof. Well, that proof is essentially they can send you an email saying, I lost my job, and that's all you're going to get. So don't ask for a bunch of documentation. You're not going to get it. What you do want to document is that you are agreeing to defer the rent, and that you are deferring the rent due to a financial hardship of the tenants, and not due to a habitability issue with the property, and not due to market conditions. That's important. That's what you want to document. You are deferring the rent due to the tenant's financial emergency, and it is not a habitability issue with the property, and it is not due to market conditions. And basically that's all you're going to get out of your tenant. But do try to get them to pay at least half. And I think it's helpful if you try and talk to them on the phone and have a real live conversation. Do a video, do a Skype, have some human contact with these people. Find out what their circumstances are. Have they not paid April rent, but maybe they can pay May, or maybe half of May? Did their unemployment finally kick in? Are they furloughed until such and such a date? Or are they hoping to go back to work whenever? Anyway, find out as much as you can about your tenant's circumstances, as much as they will tell you, in a friendly, helpful manner, and see if you can't work something out. That's my advice. And I know there are residents that's just not going to happen. And I'm not saying don't call an attorney. If you have a tenant that's not paying any rent, then you should consult an attorney. But I'm just trying to realistically, this is what we're doing at Gordon Property Management. And be as generous as you can. Your residents' lives have been turned upside down just like everybody else. And as I've kind of outlined, judicial relief is a far way off. But let's say that you are one of the landlords who just can't work with your tenants, and you do have to wait until courts open and get your relief from the courts. So let's look at what that scenario might look like. And, I see kind of two worst case scenarios. One is if you have a rent-controlled tenant who wants to keep their apartment. That's their long-term goal, to keep their apartment. They may pay partial rent between now and whatever court date you get, or they might not pay any rent at all until whatever court date you get. So they could easily sit back in their apartments and wait for that court date, whenever it is, November, December, January, February 2021, who knows when that day will be. They walk into court in San Francisco and say, Your Honor, I just got my job back. I can now pay my rent. I can't pay my back rent, but I can pay my rent now. And I have a feeling, and again, this is just my opinion, the judges in San Francisco are going to make you take that deal. Maybe they'll set up a payment plan for the back rent. Maybe they will, make the tenant pay it back. Maybe you'll have to forgive 2 months' rent. Who really knows what's going to happen? And so, again, is that's going to happen? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm kind of trying to show you worst case scenarios so that you can appreciate why I'm saying work with your tenant on this. So anyway, that was kind of one worst case scenario. The other worst case scenario is if you have a tenant whose apartment is a little more closer to market rate, and maybe they don't love their apartment, maybe they are ready to move and leave San Francisco or something, who knows, but maybe they just decide to stay there and wait until they have a court date and move out right before the court date. So you're never going to collect from them. They will be gone. You'll get your property back, but again, is it November, December, January, February 2021? You have no idea when you're going to get your property back. So and I'm not the only one to think of these things. The tenants union is advising tenants to do this. So again, your best course of action is if you can work with your tenant. Look for whatever opportunities you can with your residents. Are they living in a crappy apartment and ready to leave San Francisco? Are they interested in a buyout? If you have somebody under lease and you let them out of their lease and give them their security deposit back, will they go away? You're better off with a vacant unit than having a resident who cannot pay their rent in that unit. So, look for where opportunities that you can. There are going to be banking opportunities. As much as we're being forced to not evict our tenants, banks are being forced, hopefully at the same time, not to foreclose on property owners that can't pay their mortgage. What kind of programs are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac going to come up with? So look out for opportunities. And even working with your tenant, if you're going to be forgiving rent, do they have some kind of annoying behavior that you hope to change? Maybe it is something like, don't call me at 10 o'clock at night, or would you pay your rent online for me now? Could you allow my plumber to come whenever it's convenient for the plumber and not when it's convenient for you? Look for opportunities. Look to see, is there something you can get from your tenant? Think about it. If there's one thing you could get your tenant to do, to change, to do differently, what would it be? Think about that. So who knows what kind of opportunities are out there? But this I do know. We're going to get through this. I think we are going to survive this. And the businesses that survive post-COVID-19, and not just landlords, but the businesses that survive this kind of catastrophic change are those that are going to be looking towards the future, not the past. At Gordon Property Management, we're already starting to talk about this. How are we going to show apartments post-COVID-19? How are we going to do maintenance post-COVID-19? What are the changes that we as a property management company are going to need to make in order to survive and flourish in this new upside down world that we're living in? So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I've seen a lot of market changes in San Francisco over the years. I remember the dot-com bust in 2000, the mortgage meltdown of 2008, 2009. Our property values have taken hits before, and they've always come back. I mean, we are, rental values have gone up and down over my 30 some years in the business, but the trajectory has always been up. They have always eventually go up. So if you can ride out this downturn, I think things will come around. And I do want to caution that I think we have to be diligent. I think we really need to be supporting the California Apartment Association and the San Francisco Apartment Association. We need advocates on our behalf sitting down at the table as our governors and mayors and politicians come together to try and craft new legislation to deal with this crisis. So I think that's very important. But I do think we'll get through this. As I look at San Francisco real estate and I look at other economic opportunities out there, I'm saying real estate in San Francisco is not doing so bad. So again, my advice for what it's worth, and again, this isn't going to work for everybody. I know that there are people out there who are not going to be able to work with their tenants, who are not going to get any payment from their tenants, and I'm sorry, do the best you can with the legal system that we've got. But for those of you who can, work with your tenants, be kind, be generous, and good luck.